Hi, my name is René Jurgensen and I'm a development and fundraising consultant. In this video, I'm going to talk about how to build an effective fundraising board and fundraising committee. Both are really important in today's crucial and very competitive nonprofit market. And that we can see by going to the first point here. I put down 9 points that I want to cover in this video. This is basically a step-by-step guide. It is a little bit simplified because I'm going to do this fast. If you want any details after, you can contact me. But basically, I'll run through these 9 points, and that gives you an idea how you actually build a successful and very strong fundraising board and fundraising committee. So the first one is what I alluded to is why. Why do you need a strong fundraising board and a strong fundraising committee? Well, let's start. First, the numbers. In the US, there are 1.5 million nonprofits, and in Canada, of course, which is a smaller country, we still find a lot. It is 180,000 charities in Canada as well. So the market is overcrowded. There are so many charities, so many nonprofits out there to choose from. And that's also what we see in the giving patterns. So the trend within the donors' giving patterns is that they're choosing to give larger amount but to fewer organizations. And so this is really the trend. Instead of giving to many, donors are now giving to few because there's basically the market is overcrowded. They can't figure out, so they need to pick 1 or 2 that they actually can keep up with and that they can then focus on. And this we actually also see it's confirmed by Gallup. A big survey by Gallup found that 73% of all donors, that's 3 out of 4, they only give to 1 or 2 organizations or charities, and it's actually almost 50%, 47% only give to 1. So you see, if donors are only giving to 1 or 2 charities, they're giving less but more money. It is really an argument for why major gifts is really important, and the way to get a really strong and solid major gift program is by focusing on a fundraising board and a fundraising committee. We also find studies that AFP studies and other studies, they confirm that boards, organizations that have a board that does fundraising and has a fundraising committee, they are much more successful in reaching their financial goals and making budget at the end of the year. So this is really, it's in there that it is something that you need in order to keep up with today's market and keep building and growing your organization and growing the impact of the work your organization does, which is really what and why you need the money. That is something, in order to keep up with that, you do need a strong fundraising board and a strong fundraising committee. This is really essential today. So let's look at then the second point. So how does it work? I wrote down 2 words here that are really important, which is give and or gather. So this means that you can start, if you're a small organization, you can start really easy. You can ask your board members. Of course, everyone should give, but what you might have some board members that are very wealthy, very resourceful, and they might give a lot of money. And you might then say, okay, this board member, this committee member is giving a lot of money, 10, 20, 30, 50,000 or more. And you say, okay, that's we're satisfied with that as an organization. But then you might have other members that have a lot of connections and that are really good at approaching people and gathering money. So this is the second part, gathering money. So either are good. If somebody donates 20, 30, 50,000 or goes out and gathers 20, 30, 40, 50,000, it's basically the same amount that's brought into the organization. So that is really, where you could start, but you need to do one or the other. You cannot have board members. If you want to build a fundraising board, fundraising committee, you cannot have members that don't donate and they do not gather any money. This is against the foundation and the principles of a fundraising committee and fundraising board. But of course, the idea where you want to get to, when you go through all these points, where you want to get to is to have a fundraising board and a fundraising committee where you have really strong members that are both giving a lot and also gathering a lot. That is really the ideal situation. That's really where you want to get to. And I'll explain later how that is done. Then the third point here is that you want to start with setting up the expectations. You don't want to give board members a wrong idea about why they're joining. So you really want to be very clear about what are the expectations of a board member and a fundraising committee member. And that you do by simply drawing up terms of reference. So you have terms for the board, you have terms for the fundraising committee, and that states basically what you are expecting of the board member and committee member. And of course, this can be a document that you develop as you go through the steps and you build this fundraising board, fundraising committee, you can change the terms and keep evolving the terms and really make them stronger and better. But it's really important to start with the terms so each board member that joins signs up and understands that these are the requirements to be a member. And this can be anything from putting in that the expectations is you give or gather, or it can also be when your board is very strong, your committee is very strong, that you actually put a dollar amount for each member. This is how really successful organizations do it, but that's something that takes time to build. So you want to start with the expectations, and these terms might also have time requirement, the minimum time requirement, how many meetings they have to show up for, how many they can miss. It's all up to you how you want to set the guideline through the terms. Then the fourth point is communicate. Communicate here is also very, very important. And what I'm thinking of here is in relation to, of course, generally the board members, the committee members, they need to be on top of the work your organization does. So that's a special newsletter, that's a special briefing on what are the new events, what's going on. Maybe the ED writes a monthly newsletter to the board members, to the committee members, and gives them an insight of what really happened and what they need to know. But it's also in relation to fundraising. And having a strong fundraising board and strong fundraising committee, it's important to communicate the mission. How does fundraising relate to the mission? How are the two connected? So, for instance, why are we trying to raise more money, or why are we trying to raise this amount? Because with this amount, we're able to do this work. We might have new projects, we might want to hire new staff, we might want to expand our office or get our own building through a capital campaign. Whatever it is, it needs to be communicated to the board member and committee members why we are raising money, because it's not really about money. The money pays for doing your mission. It pays for impacting your community or impacting the world. So that connection needs to be made. So the board members, some of them might be a little bit afraid of fundraising, so they really understand it's not about money, it's about changing the world. And in order to change the world and your community, you need money to do it. And they just need to be able to make that link. So that's a process that's very important to communicate that. That helps them overcome the fear, basically, of fundraising. Then number 5, expand. And so by this I mean that it is really important to have, by having a strong fundraising committee or a strong fundraising board, or a board for that matter, it is important that you have enough members. Actually, studies here I wrote down, studies show that boards that have, or committees that have less than 10 members, they only reach their fundraising goal in 50% of cases, whereas as boards or fundraising committees that have 20 to 30 members, they almost 68% of these organizations, they reach their financial goals. They make budget at the end of the year. And of course that makes sense, because the more members you have, the more resources you have. The members are basically volunteers, and they're going to go out there and do a lot of quality work for you that is really beneficial. So the more members, the stronger the organization, the stronger the fundraising is. What we actually see is some of the really large institutions such as hospitals and universities, they might have fundraising, they might have 5, 6, 7, or 8 fundraising committees, and a total of each might have 20 to 30 members, so they might have 100, 150 members. And this is really, really effective, because they might separate the work of the institution or the work of the hospital into groups. So one fundraising committee raises for a special program within the institution or the hospital. And that's something you can do as well within your organization. You can have gala committees, golf committees, but you can also have committees that focus on a special program that you work on, a special project, and then they fundraise for that. So try to think big, think expand, and don't be afraid. I also wrote down 89%. A couple of studies actually found that a lot of people that are high net worth individuals, a lot of wealthy individuals, they like to volunteer. Basically, people have reached the top of their career and they now would like to give back. And this is really a high percentage, 89%, that's 9 out of 10. So don't be afraid to reach out and approach new members, because they are really looking for an opportunity to give back. And by you reaching out, sending a letter, giving them a call, inviting them to a meeting, talking about becoming a member, what is the work you do, you're actually doing them a favor. You are giving them an opportunity to give back to their community, the same community that has brought them, the success in their life and the wealth that they're at. So this is really an exchange. So don't be afraid to ask. And then who should you ask when you're expanding? I would like to say that it is really nice to be strategic. I would go after all the different sectors that you have in your community or where you're living at. And so I would think, where is the money? How do you should see these members as basically bridge builders or door openers. So what are the sectors where you know you can find interest in the work you do, but also money? So of course, generally organizations, they will look at banking, the banking sector, have bank CEOs, VPs if they can't get the CEO. You also want to look, of course, the investment industry, which is very wealthy as well. And you want to look at something like the real estate sector. You want to look at the business sector, sales, big corporations. I've actually found that salespeople, once you train them in how to do fundraising, they become very effective, because sales is all about making that call and approaching people. And that's the same thing with fundraising. If you hide under the desk and you don't approach people, you won't get any money. And it's actually very important to understand that it's something that you should overcome your fear of. There is a really famous story about Nelson Mandela, who of course was fighting for the independence of India. And somewhere during this fight, he actually asked Margaret Thatcher if she would donate to his organization. And she said yes. She donated £20,000. And later in an interview, Nelson Mandela was asked, how did you get the Iron Lady to donate to your charity? I mean, you were supposed to be enemies, right? And he said, well, I simply asked. And that's really the foundation here. You really want to have people that are able to ask. And that brings us down to the sixth point here, which is really training. You want to train your board members and your committee members in how to do fundraising. You might be lucky and get savvy fundraisers on your board, on your committee, and they might be able to lead some of the training. They might be able to, what you can do is, there's a lot of documents out there, or you can reach out to me as a consultant and I'll come in and work with your board or fundraising committee. But some ways to train and some things you can do on your own is, for instance, to see your board members, you see them as door openers. So basically, you start out really in a soft way. You don't tell them to get out and gather money. You basically do it step by step. You teach them how this is done. So the first step you can do is use them as door openers. So what they do here is that you ask them to set up a meeting, an appointment with some of their connections. And it can also be a major donor. It's to practice how to set it up. So they will reach out to their connections or some of your current donors, and they will then set up the meeting, and then you will go with them as a fundraiser development staff, or you will send them out with your executive director, or maybe the three of you. And this way, the committee member the board member can now watch you in action and see how it's done. So here, this is a really effective way. And this is another way after opening the door, you can take them to the next step, which is where you team them up with either yourself as a savvy fundraiser or somebody on your committee that's really, really good. So you team up the weaker members with the strong members, and then they go out together, they do the work together, and that way it becomes a kind of training that really gets them, after 3, 4, 5 meetings, they'll be able to do it on their own. And also, it's also important to share stories when you come back, share your successes or share your challenges. So when you come back, when you have your fundraising committee meetings or your board meetings and you talk about fundraising, talk about what happened at the last major donor you tried to approach. What happened? How did it work? What didn't work? And keep communicating and learning about the process. This is really important in the training process here. But basically, think of it this way. The same way as Nelson Mandela. It's all about asking. You simply ask. You won't get yes all the time, but if you don't ask, you cannot receive. And this is really about understanding that fundraising is something that everyone can learn, and you can teach all your board members, all your committee members to become really strong fundraisers. And this is what you want to do. This is how you build the strong committee, by training them and continuously making it better. You can either do weekend workshops, you can do one-day retreats where you focus on fundraising. You can bring me in as a consultant, or you can do it on your own. Train, keep training and improving the members, because the benefits are just enormous. They work for free, they volunteer their time, so everything they bring in has a really excellent cost benefit. So then, responsibility. Now you have trained your board members, your committee members in how to do fundraising. They're now becoming good and hopefully soon very savvy. So now you can go to the next level, which is where you want to implement responsibility. It shouldn't be just something where we see, okay, I tried, we weren't lucky, and what can you do? You really want to make each board member, each committee member responsible for the work they do. And the way you do that is you give them a donor list. You might start out with 5 donors, you can start with 10, but the idea is that you have a list that you keep growing, and this is a list that each member then becomes responsible for. So these are the donors that they will approach, they will meet with, and they will bring back money. And at the bottom line of their list is a dollar amount. That is basically their yearly budget that they should try to bring in. And of course, this list is something you grow. You ask each year, you ask them to find new prospects, to bring in new connections, or you might also have a prospecting process where you supply them with new prospects that they then have to reach out to through peer-to-peer. Peer-to-peer here means that if you have a lawyer on your committee, or you have a banker or a real estate agent, they reach out to the people in their peers within their sector. And that is really how peer-to-peer fundraising works here. It's a lot more effective when a member of your committee speaks the same language as a prospect that is in the same sector. That is really how you want to think about doing it peer-to-peer. So you keep growing the list, you add prospects, and you keep growing the number at the bottom line for each board member, each committee member. That's how you implement responsibility, and that's how you get them to be responsible for the donors and the amount that they raise each year. And then once you've done this, you're now ready for the real important step, which is 8 here, is to set a goal. By setting a goal, I mean you should both set an individual goal. So this is the list, the dollar amount of each member. You know, they might not be the same in the beginning because different members have different skills. Some are really savvy, some are less savvy. Some might give a lot more personally, and others might gather a lot more. So you might be a little flexible on this amount. I'm just telling you that you can be flexible, but really effective committees, they have pretty much the same dollar amount. But that's when you get really good in your committee and in your fund, on your board to raise money. But you might want to start with just setting a flexible goal. Some members have different goals depending on their list and what they raised last year. But then you also want to tie this individual goal. You want to tie that into setting a goal for the organization. This can be a goal, a dollar amount for the board and for the fundraising committee. You basically want to have a combined goal. And of course, this goal is something you need the buy-in from the members, the board members. You need to say, you know, we want to get to the point now. We all have our list. We're all bringing in this much money. Now we want to move to the point where we want to set a goal for the committee, a fundraising goal for the board members. And this is, of course, something you need people's buy-in, so it needs to be realistic, and everybody needs to be motivated. They need to buy into the goal, they need to approve it, but you also, of course, because it's in the budget, but you also want to push it a little bit. You want to say, you know, let's be ambitious. Let's try to be ambitious. How much do we think we could increase? How much do we think we could reach? What could our goal be? And of course, now here it comes back to communicating. How would this goal tie in with the mission, with the work you do? So here again, you need to understand what is going on the programming side. What are some of the needs and some of the things we would like to get done on the programming side? It might be expanding the staff, it might be expanding office and so forth, but all the needs need to be communicated back here to the board and then fundraising committee, and understand why would we need to set a goal? What would we do with that money if we could reach that goal? And that again is the motivator that motivates the board and the fundraising committee to go out there and do a really great job. And that then leads us to the final point, which is celebrate. Of course, fundraising can become very dry. It becomes very much a mind process, thinking about numbers. So it's really important to come back down into the heart and remember that we should also have fun. I mean, we should celebrate. Make sure your board, your committee members, they are invited to all your special events. You might have special committee events or board events, which is just for the board members. Or you might have special major donor events where you're sure to bring the board members that have some of these major donors on their list and make sure that they connect. But sometimes you want to have a special event where it's not about money, where it's just about celebrating, having a good time and meeting others and just relaxing and really, in a way, thanking the members for all the hard work they do. So this is up to you. You can be creative, but make sure to celebrate your board members, your committee members for the work they do, and also celebrate the successes. When somebody brings in a large donation or opens a new door, make sure that you thank them and you talk about it in the meetings. It inspires everybody else, and it's a really good way to have a positive and fun way to do fundraising. That's it. those are my 9 points on how to build a strong, successful fundraising board and fundraising committee. If you want to know more details, specifics, if you want to know how this can be done in your organization, feel free to reach out to me. I am available through phone and email on my website, which you can find at the end of the video or at the top here at the contact bottom. So I look forward to hearing from you, and I wish you good luck and success in your fundraising endeavors. Thank you.